It's insane that we are living in the year of 2014 already, yet we aren't getting the right to know what is in our food. It's terribly ironic because isn't this country supposed to be known for having a democracy that allows its citizens more rights than any other countries? Isn't the United States supposed to be the land of the free? That's such a drastic change to our crops. People argue that GMOs don't look different, don't taste too different, but there's way more than what meets the eye. Plus, if they were so similar to non-altered food, why has the U.S. Patent Office given hundreds of patents identifying these genetically modified foods as absolutely distinctive new life forms that are, in fact, completely unique? They've accomplished an amazing feat. Why are the government officials and heads of these companies so reluctant to take credit for their work and show it off loud and proud? Oh, they're just so modest.
It's surprising to know the amount of people who don't know anything, not only about GM food, but about the food that they buy every day in the supermarket. You see, they come to me and they say, Jimmy, why are you complicating my life, with all this GM food? What we have now is perfectly okay. And the truth is that this is not a proper question, because in this question you're assuming that what you have today is perfectly okay.
I do not know what GMOs are. What are they? No, I don't.
So, do you know what GMOs are?
I have no clue.
So, do you know what GMOs are?
No.
So, do you know what GMOs are? So, do you know what genetically modified foods are? So, what do you think GMOs are?
I don't know.
We need more people to be aware of the fact that genetically modified foods are out there, and one of the main ways to help inform people of their existence is by simply putting a label saying what they are, GMOs. Also, we're talking about clear, direct labels right on the product itself. It's not going to be hidden behind some shelf, printed in minuscule letters, or any other crazy things one can do, and it definitely shouldn't be labeled the way McDonald's labels their caloric info of their foods.
John Banzaf and I looked all over this McDonald's in Washington for any nutritional information. And then we found it.
Aha! Oh, here we go. Behind here, you'd never see it. It's right back there.
We all know that McDonald's has been trying to hide the blatant fact that their food is both highly caloric and pretty and healthy, so they naturally hit their nutritional information labels. Are the GMO companies and federal officials that are against GMO labeling hiding something too? We asked students what they thought about GMO labeling in general.
I think I personally would promote labeling due to the fact that I feel like as a consumer you should have the right to know what you're purchasing. The fact is you're using the money that you've earned to purchase something, and in a marketplace you should be willing to, as a distributor of goods or as a person that's selling goods, be willing to explain exactly what you're selling. The fact that you're not putting a sticker on a product that is a GMO, a genetically modified organism, provides the consumer without enough insight, and it makes it so we're no longer in a place of authority as to whether we can consume what we wish to. As someone who does not want to consume something that's been genetically modified, I don't find it to be healthy.
Would you want GMO labeling?
Definitely.
Of course.
I would not support GMO labeling because GMOs aren't that bad.
Statistics nationwide showed that 93% of people wanted GMOs labeled. Such near unanimity in public opinion is rare. And that's kind of funny, since 92% of Americans don't agree on anything. It's nice to know that most Democrats and Republicans are finally agreeing on something.
If you live in the United States, you almost certainly consume a genetically modified organism or GMO on a daily basis. Maybe it's the sugar beets that were used to make the sugar in the cookie you're eating, or the mayo on the sandwich made from GM soybeans, and yesterday's hamburger, I can almost guarantee it was produced by a cow that ate GM corn. Before long, we'll be eating entire genetically modified animals. In 2012, the FDA gave its okay for a new kind of Atlantic salmon engineered to have higher levels of growth hormone using the genes of Pacific salmon and an eel-like fish called the ocean pout. It's the first GM animal to be approved for human consumption.
Is manipulated in a laboratory to do something not intended by nature, like taking the DNA of a fish and putting it into the DNA of a tomato. Yuck. Don't get me wrong, I like fish and tomatoes, but this is just creepy. The seeds are then planted, then grown. The food they produce have been proven to cause cancer and other problems in lab animals. And people have been eating food produced this way since the 1990s, and most folks don't even know they exist. Did you know rats that genetically engineered corn had developed signs of liver and kidney toxicity? These include kidney inflammation and lesions and decreased kidney weight. Yet almost all the corn we eat has been altered genetically in some way. And let me tell you, corn isn't everything.
What our foundation is doing is we're working with partners. For example, DuPont Pioneer on some new maize things, with ADM on some cocoa growing things. Some of these are traditional breeding and some of them are transgenic. In parallel, we're also funding scientific expertise in Africa. So when 3 or 4 years from now, if things go as expected, there are some crops with big benefits, drought resistance, that the transgenic approach probably can do better than any other approach.
We felt rejected like J.K. Rowling when she got rejected by 12 publishers. It was sad. Heather from Sprouts was nice enough to let me interview her.
So would you support the labeling of GMO products at Sprouts?
Yes.
And why?
Because I feel people should be able to know what's been modified and what's not been modified for safety reasons.
Do you believe that it would help bring in more business?
Yes, because people would be more interested in knowing what's been modified or not. I feel it would bring in a lot more customers because customers here worry about what's in their food and a lot of them buy organic. So it would help a lot if they knew what was in the food, which one was safe, and because it's definitely safety concerns nowadays with all the findings they've been finding from it. I feel that it should be a federal issue and that they should mandate all states to do it. And to help out with that, I think it would be good to write to state senators or any of them and give them information about it because a lot of them don't even know what it is that's going on. And that's probably the best way to get it done rather than just waiting or protesting or anything like that. I think a lot of states are reluctant because the company that adds in the GMOs and all that probably has money that they give to the government officials to get that stuff passed. Because that happens a lot with even tobacco and things like that. it's a lot of money being spent. And I think that's a lot of reasons why they don't feel the need to pass anything or enforce anything.
As you can see, there are many people in favor for the labeling of genetically modified food, and America is supposed to be a democracy. None of us regular citizens had a say in whether or not GMOs should be labeled. It was all done by a small council of FDA leaders from all the way back in 1992. That's what, 23 years if my math isn't off? And that's a long time. It's now time for some new changes to be made regarding the issue. Over 90% of soy is genetically modified. Over 85% of corn is genetically modified. You might be saying, I don't eat corn on the cob every day, or I don't drink soy milk every day, or even, YOLO, who cares?
But that's not the real significance of those mind-blowing numbers. Like Hank Green mentioned earlier, it means that over 75% of processed food Americans normally consume now contains genetically modified material in it. Did we mention that none of the genetically modified ingredients are actually mentioned as GMOs? What's more, it's not fair for people against GMOs, because nobody can control Mother Nature, nor the spreading of plants to other fields that could be designated as non-GMO or organic. Could we actually be paying more money for organic foods that have been contaminated by GMOs?
Already, there are more than 24 superweed species that have popped up that are resistant to Roundup, covering millions of acres in the United States. Even GMO crops themselves can become weeds. After all, there's no way of containing a crop once it's planted. Seeds were designed to travel. So in North Dakota, for instance, GM canola has escaped fields and now grows in the wild. Plus, it can easily cross with related wild and domestic species from mustard to broccoli, which then messes with the GMO plants as well as the wild plants.
Green brings another great point regarding bees. I mean, we just have to start telling those darn bees to start differentiating between GMO and non-GMO plants. They are just so annoying, messing with scientists' attempts to strictly regulate nature. And don't even get us started with wind and other seed-carrying animals. Man, why can't they get it?
Messing with Mother Nature has never produced good results in the long run. We produce something to stop or kill a bacterium or anything else we deem pesky, and she decides to ensure that some of those things survive and produce offspring known as superbugs or superweeds. Thus, the whole cycle starts all over again. What is even worse now is that what we're trying to fight off is now stronger than ever, all thanks to us.
We're not going to win this battle with Mother Nature. This has already happened in medical history. Do we want it to ruin all the food we eat as well? When are we going to learn our lesson? GMOs are made when engineers inject things into the genes and splice them with insecticides and herbicides. As history repeats itself, we first rejoice at crops being resistant to bugs and bacteria that cause problems. Then, as these superbugs come along and do their thing, engineers have to find something stronger to inject into the plant's genes. Now, 2,4-D-dicamba is being used as a built-in insecticide in crops all over the country. That may not mean much, but if we told you that dicamba is 50% of Agent Orange, that chemical that destroyed half the jungle in Vietnam and devastated the lives of all that lived in Vietnam, I think it's safe to say that we're consuming some pretty deadly chemicals here. Do we really want to be consuming this? I guess it can be said that the whole adding in chemicals with half the deadliness of Agent Orange is not really helping in proving GMOs as safe, like the FDA and GMO companies claim. But seriously, the whole aspect of ingesting these chemicals like Agent Orange really calls for the need for GMO labeling as quick as possible, so more people will know what they're buying. Why hasn't our government taken the steps necessary like these countries shown?
55 nations around the world actually take the exact opposite view, that when these crops are approved for commercialization, labeling is absolutely required. Really progressive countries like, well, first of all of the EU, and most of our trading partners, but really progressive countries like Russia, China, even Syria, have mandated labeling. Now you may wonder, why do these countries offer liberties to their citizens that we in the land of the free don't have? And that, I assure you, is beyond the scope of my discussion today, but it has something to do with corporate influence in Washington, I'm pretty sure. In 2010, the President's Cancer Panel came out and reported that 41% of Americans are going to be diagnosed with cancers in our lifetimes. And the smoking gun that this prestigious panel referred to in their study is chemicals, primarily herbicides and pesticides, in our air, water, soil, and food. Months after this study came out, we had a peer-reviewed study reporting an absolute correlation between pesticide exposure and ADHD, which is really an epidemic in our society.
Their impacts on the environment and on human health are largely unknown. So some countries, most recently Peru and Russia, have banned their import and use because people tend to not like unknowns, especially if you're eating them.
That's right. The main problem is that GMOs and their long-term effects on humans and the environment are still largely unknown. Many countries have agreed with us and have done something about it, such as implementing GMO labeling, safety precautions, and even outright banning of GMOs. The problem isn't whether it is safe or absolutely harmful, as there are many benefits to producing GMO crops too. We're not calling for the ban of GMOs. We just believe that the FDA should be required to be held accountable for making us aware of the potential outcome of GMOs and their altered states by labeling them and releasing more information about them to the public. After all, the average consumer obviously can't see the process of splicing genes. Getting GMOs to come labeled nationwide is something American people should try to get accomplished as soon as possible for the good of all consumers.
Audio